This is the state of the nation. Rifa Uganda. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Salah.
Good morning, good evening, good night. Except the video with you today is privilege. As you all know, today we are examining how laws are implemented in Uganda and what it means for magistrates to do the right thing. So when bail becomes an act of constitutional courage, what does that really translate to? In a political climate where bail is increasingly treated as a favor rather than a constitutional safeguard, magistrates who apply the law faithfully can appear radical. Now, Uganda's justice system is facing quiet but defining test. Whether courts will serve the constitution or bend to political pressure. The recent decision by Magistrate Sheila Gloria Atim to grant bail to Honorable Dr. Miria Matembe stands out because it cut across and against a broader political tide in which critics of government often face prolonged detention, delayed hearings, or bail denial. Reports indicate that Matembe, a former ethics minister and outspoken critic, was granted non-cash bail after the court found that she had satisfied the legal requirements for temporary release. That is not so different from Dr. Kizza Besigye or the Lord Mayor Emeritus Salongo Elias Lukwago. They all satisfied those legal requirements. So, Justice Sheila Gloria Atim's decision should not be extraordinary. First of all, bail is part of the constitutional promise for liberty. And yet today, Uganda simply applying that principle can look courageous. The question, therefore, is not whether Justice Atim was courageous, but rather when the ordinary application of law becomes politically unusual, what does that tell us about the state of justice in Uganda? In studio with me is going to be our usual suspects. Dr. Stella Nyazi will be joining us tonight or today. Isaac Semakade, the president of the Uganda Law Society, is going to be joining us. And of course, Egesa Leonard Ronald, who is a business and political strategist, is also going to be joining us when we are digesting some of these conversations. Please share with your colleagues, share. If you're on YouTube, please share, LinkedIn share, call in as many people as you can to come and listen in. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. We do not take your support for granted. We appreciate your support and we encourage you to continue sharing these conversations as we continue to engage in what we call freedom of expression, what is justice, and how can we continue to protect the will of the Constitution or the will of the people, which is embedded in Uganda's Constitution. How do we continue to support it, but also to defend it where we must or when we must. As I continue to wait for my colleagues to join me, I hope you have had a great day today. For most of you who are following Ugandan politics, I want to encourage folks in the diaspora to know and understand that Uganda is visitable, it is tourable. There is no Ebola as it has been in the news. Now folks are able to visit Uganda well. Godfrey Yiga, we really appreciate your support. We want to have you we want to have you join us in the stream. So let me know how I can best get in touch with you so that you can come and join us and share some of your perspectives on how Uganda must be governed, and how citizens should engage in facilitating the growth and the equal rights within their jurisdictions, especially those who live in Uganda on a regular basis. Once again, my name is Henry Sally, and this is the State of the Nation. For some reason, my internet seems to be lagging behind. So if you're taking long to hear what I'm saying, it's perhaps because of that. Nonetheless, we shall continue to discuss issues as they appear. It seems to be slow for some reason. All right, for those of you who have been following politics in Uganda, one of the big questions today is why bail matters. So bail is not an acquittal. Rather, it is a recognition that an accused person remains presumed innocent until proven guilty. By just understanding this premise, a few questions come in mind. What is the constitutional basis of bail in Uganda? Why has bail become politically controversial? And are courts increasingly pressured to treat dissenters as guilty before trial? Case in point, you can look at Dr. Kizza Besigye, you can look at the Lord Mayor Emeritus, Salongo Elias Lukwago. You can also look at so many other cases, the case of Mufumbila, for example, and so many other political prisoners. In my opinion, a justice system that fears granting bail has already begun confusing accusation with conviction. And the question then becomes, how do we navigate that confusion? How do we put that confusion to right? When people choose to completely misalign . 'Cause, 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 'c accusation with conviction, when they combine them, when they don't know that someone who is just accused of something is not guilty until proven so, and therefore they deserve to be given bail, when they choose not to give them bail, how do we treat such a decision? So for those of you who are following the case of Honorable Miria Matembe, or rather, I would like to frame it as Magistrate Sheila Gloria Atim and Miria Matembe moment. We know that Magistrate Atim right, Dr. Stella has joined us, and the other folks haven't joined us yet, but they should be joining us as soon as possible. I know. Yes. Dr. Stella, pleasure to meet you. You found me speaking about the events that happened the previous week pertaining to Magistrate Sheila Gloria Atim and the Honorable Dr. Miria Matembe, where the Magistrate Atim's ruling matters not because it has a revolutionary aspect on it, or not because it is revolutionary in itself, but because it was a principled context. So according to some of the information, and of course, both on X, but also in mainstream media. So for example, Chimp Reports quoted Atim defending her judicial independence and saying that she owed allegiance to Uganda, right? Other aspects of her decision are quoted in New Vision as someone who decided to give Matembe, Honorable Miria Matembe, a non-cash bail after satisfying the court's requirement. But we all know that there are many people who have had those prerequisites fulfilled or satisfied, but are still rotting in jail. For instance, my friend, the Lord Mayor of Kampala, Elias Lukwago, was denied bail, even though he had he had satisfied all the prerequisites for receiving bail. It's not just Lukwago; it's the Mufumbilas, all the political prisoners right now, rotting in jail. It is Dr. Kiza Besije. It's many other people, nameless people, that we may not know, who have been either denied bail or whose bail has been delayed, which means justice has been delayed in that aspect as well. Before we delve into this conversation, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how you are doing this morning or this evening, this afternoon? Doctor.
Hi, Henry. Can you hear me well?
I hear you well. I hope you're hearing
Right.
me as well.
Yes, I hear you. Although today your visual is blurry, but it could also be my internet. Thank you for organizing today's space to discuss matters pertaining to Uganda. My name is Stella Nyanzi. I'm a Ugandan refugee living in Germany, from where I join you weekly on Sunday evenings to think through what's happening in our country as we anticipate a free Uganda soon. So yeah, that's who I am.
Thank you so much for joining us again. There's so many things that have been happening this week. It's been an eventful week, similar to what happened last week. Your thoughts on, first and foremost, Justice Sheila Gloria Atim, that delivered a bail for Honorable Dr. Miria Matembe. Any thoughts on how that was perceived, number one, but also welcomed, and how that is going to influence courts going forward?
Right. So I was among many Ugandans and other people who love and are interested in issues of Uganda who were horrified when we, witnessed the abduction of Honorable Miria Matembe after military personnel went to her house and searched for her in the presence of her elderly husband. At the time of her search, Dr. Miria Matembe was not found at home. However, we then got reports about how she was missing from home. Nobody had seen her, and there were questions about her whereabouts. Shortly thereafter, there was confirmation that she'd been taken by Muhoozi, which has sort of become custom. It's become normalized that SFC, on the orders of Muhoozi Kainerugaba, the CDF of Uganda, abduct people who get disappeared, and when they are thrown into police stations, often they're wounded. And I think that there was a bit of relief when limping Dr. Miria Matembe, supported by a female relative, was shown on the internet, TV, as well as photographs. And why the bail application was specifically of interest to Ugandans is because there has been so far a repeat, a replay, an echo of the denial of bail of political prisoners, many of whom are abducted similar to herself, others much more violently, that when they are produced before magistrates in different courts in Uganda, we have seen the pattern, the trend is to deny them bail. In fact, what happened on the day of her production, the first day when she was arraigned before Magistrate Sheila Gloria Atim, was legal gymnastics, where her lawyers applied for bail, and the state prosecutors countered this by raising so many different issues about time, and the magistrate was pressed for time. I remember she talked about having an order that requires all magistrates to stop work at 5 o'clock. And she asked for evidence, proof that Dr. Miria Matembe was in fact ill or had a dislocated or degenerating disc in her spine, and that evidence, in terms of the paper, the evidence she required wasn't readily available. But also there were questions around what law or what precedent was provided for her, the magistrate, to act upon to release Miria Matembe on bail that day. Because of the lateness of the hour, another sort of strategy that the military junta works with to abduct people, throw them into police when it's quite late, take them to court when it's too late to process bail. There isn't adequate time. Many times magistrates are then pressed to remand the bail applicant, the suspect, remand them to prison, irrespective of the status of their health, irrespective of their charges being bailable, their offenses being bailable, irrespective of sureties even being present, etc., etc. And I think that when Magistrate Sheila Gloria Atim, when she considered everything, she remanded Dr. Miria Matembe to Luzira Women's Prison, which was very shocking for very many Ugandans who are witnessing this. And for myself, as well as others who joined in online spaces and WhatsApp chat groups, there were questions about how Dr. Miria Matembe would survive in Luzira Women Prison. There was also a lot of anticipation about the following day when she'd be brought back to court and what would transpire. And we were not certain that, in fact, she would be granted bail. And so it was a wonderful surprise when, at the very end of the following day, this woman, Sheila Gloria Atim, in fact, granted Honorable Miria Matembe bail that was non-cash, both for herself and her sureties. It was a long, protracted bail application, bail processing, which necessitated checking of, phone numbers, checking of addresses, ensuring that she was well. There was a lot of altercation, particularly coming from the state prosecutor, who took it upon herself to criticize Dr. Miria Matembe's character, her language, her posture, her lack of humility, who questioned whether or not she had a home, issues many of us found rather problematic. How dare anyone question if Dr. Miria Matembe had an address, etc., etc. But I think what won the day for many of us who had spent the night before criticizing the magistrate for remanding Miria Matembe to Luzira Women Prison for a night, what stood out for us the following day was, despite all the challenges, despite the context in which very many magistrates and judges and other judicial officers, in fact, work on orders from above, work with pressure from the military regime of Dictator Yoweri Museveni and increasingly his son, Kainerugaba Muhoozi, Sheila Gloria Atim was able to grant Miria Matembe bail. And I think for me, part of the courage, part of the evidence of her having extra courage is, in fact, in the wording of her decision to grant bail, where she calls on her loyalty to Uganda, her allegiance to Uganda, where she references her Christian Catholic religion, where she makes it clear that she's acting contrary to the general current of cadre judges, cadre magistrates. And in many ways, I think she signaled that she was working against the grain when, in fact, she granted bail to Dr. Miria Matembe. So that's my comment, Henry. I don't know if you're there. I don't know if I'm speaking alone in the space. Are you there, Henry Sally? Am I talking to myself? Did the space crash? I need to just check quickly. Oh dear. So I will continue talking. I suppose for me as a Ugandan in diaspora, as a Ugandan who is exiled, as a Ugandan refugee, I really was looking forward to having this conversation together with Councillor Isaac Semakade, because I noticed that the Uganda Law Society issued a statement in which they reference Sheila Gloria Atim's granting of Miria Matembe bail, and they reference this as a moment of courage. And in fact, when in today's letter, was it yesterday's letter from Uganda Law Society, where they condemn the speech of Dictator Yoweri Museveni, where he is toying around and discrediting the right to bail, trying to dismiss the constitutional right to bail, the Uganda Law Society statement references Sheila Atim's boldness to issue Miria Matembe bail as an act of courage. And so I think for me that act of courage is really to be celebrated because of the context which is one in which many magistrates, many judges, many judicial officers are reticent, they are scared, they are cowardly, and many of them act as if there is an order, a blanket order to all judicial officers to in fact deny all political prisoners bail and instead automatically remand them to prison even when they are not guilty, even when they've taken charge as not being guilty, even when their cases are bailable. And so many people talk about the case of Dr. Kizza Besigye, and there are questions about whether that is a bailable offense. But I think for me that Sheila Gloria Atim stands out particularly because she seems to have decided not to act in consort, to act similar to act in agreement with other judicial officers who have yielded to this blanket order from above to remand all political prisoners. So I see you're back, Henry. Maybe I can hand back the microphone to you and wait. But I was saying I'm looking forward to listening to both Isaac Semakade, who is an advocate lawyer, the president of the Uganda Law Society, as well as Ronald Leonard Egesa, who is a political strategist, because perhaps they might have more factors based within the law, within the constitution, based on their professions, based also within the politics in Uganda to contribute towards this conversation about bail. But thanks for organizing the space, Henry.
Always a pleasure organizing. Of course, sometimes you can face challenges here and there, but always a pleasure to be in this space and engaging in some of these very important conversations. I don't know where Egesa and Isaac are at the moment, but they'll join us whenever they are ready to join us. So I guess given what Atim, Magistrate Atim, Sheila Atim Gloria has done, my question is, why haven't we come out in a similar fashion that we came out for Justice Basemera, who vehemently refused or denied Lukwago's bail, to praise him, in praise of Atim, Magistrate Atim, even though what she did is what she's supposed to do. It is what is within the law. It is, in her words, standing with Uganda and not in any one person. It is, in her words, leaving it to God, to only God to judge her decision, and not any individual. Why is it that Ugandans have not come out in praises of Justice Atim or Magistrate Atim for doing the right thing? Or shouldn't folks that do the right thing be acknowledged for taking the bold steps to do the right thing at a time when it is considered radical to do the right thing?
Look, so I don't know what Ugandans you're referring to, but I've seen a number of Ugandans who actually celebrated Sheila Gloria Atim for the decision she took concerning granting Dr. Miria Matembe bail, which was non-cash, both for the accused and her sureties. What many people criticized the night before was the fact that a team had in fact remanded Dr. Miria Matembe to Luzira Women Prison the night before. So Miria Matembe was not granted bail immediately. She spent a night in prison. And so when you say why aren't Ugandans celebrating? The Ugandans in my part of the world are actually celebrating Gloria Atim Sheila Gloria Atim, because what she did was unusual. Of course, some were critical of the fact that she references her Catholic religion as being part of the basis why she found the courage to do this. But for others, the idea is, how does one challenge the status quo if many magistrates and judges are yielding to the pressure to perform a particular form of judicial practice where they want to impress the abductor, they want to impress the military junta by using remand and the denial of bail as a punishment? If they don't deny bail immediately, they prolong the process where remand takes up to 21 days. I think the limit is maybe 30 days. I was once a political prisoner running in and out of those court systems and begging for bail. So I think the maximum number of days in which to process a bail application is 30 days between the application and the decision. But again, I would want to refer this issue of how long is permissible to Isaac Semakade. And so I think my part of the world, people were critical of the fact that just for one night, we were not sure. And the factors I spelled out were the fact that initially Gloria Atim asked for a precedent where a magistrate either returned a suspect to the police, because there had been a request by the lawyers that Miria Matembe be returned to the police and then brought the following day because of the 5 o'clock time limit, which Atim had mentioned. It was time for her to go to stop work for the day. And then she asked for a precedent, which was not readily available to the lawyers defending, representing, advocating for the bail application. And so that was the first reason. The other reason people were critical was because she asked for evidence of the health status, evidence of the pain, evidence. And Miria Matembe's status, she came in limping, she was crying with pain. She talked about her medical history. The expectation was that all of this should sort of influence the magistrate to be compassionate and grant bail on humanitarian reasons. The third was because Miria Matembe is elderly and Luzira Women Prison is very difficult. So there was criticism about the 1 day remand. Otherwise, the Ugandans that I talk to, the Ugandans that I speak with, celebrated her courage not to follow the status quo, not to uphold the status quo. She granted Miria Matembe bail, knowing full well that she was going against the grain. She was maybe upsetting those who issue orders from above to remand all political prisoners. So perhaps you're asking about why Ugandans did not celebrate the magistrate who released, who issued orders for former Lord Mayor Salongeria Silukwago to be transferred from the prisons to hospital for medication. Was that your question?
Well, we could also answer that question, but I was wondering if Justice Atim was given enough flowers for doing the right thing. But there's also, it's not Justice Atim alone. I think a similar, I don't remember the name of the justice, but the justice in the case of Sarah Birete also offered bail to Sarah. So,
yeah, but after how long was Sarah granted bail?
After a week, I think it was after a couple of days in jail.
Timothy Kaliyajira was also granted bail.
Yeah.
Perhaps after a few days.
After a few days, yeah. After more than 48 hours, which should be the time frame within which bail hearing should be had and perhaps offered. So in this case, the reason why Justice Atim should, in my opinion, should be given flowers is because of the nature of the accused, Dr. Miria Matembe, who is one of the most critical elite members of society, critical of government, right? And we have seen that most people who are critical of government or who tend to question how government operates have not been favored by the law. The law has seemed to favor people who align with government or who align with how the government operates, and who are not pursued by MK or the current CDF. We have seen that most people who have been directly pursued by MK have also tended to face bail denial or prolonged detention before being given bail. So I guess the question is, what does this really mean for the justice system in Uganda? And how should citizens perceive this decision or view it as we continue to interrogate the justice system of Uganda?
So the politicization, I think that that bail has been politicized in Uganda. You know, we know conversations. I know you want to go to the Muhoozi moment, but I want to go back a little bit to the Museveni. For long, dictator Museveni has, he's been very public about his intentions to outlaw bail, and his statements in a way condition judicial officers, especially those who are assigned to try cases involving political dissidents or political party leaders or even foot soldiers who belong to the opposition political parties, particularly the ones in the NUP cases, the young people who are arrested and charged with military drills, or those who are abducted, arrested in Luka and have been in jail for 5 years, or Dr. Kizza Besigye, or there's a long list of political prisoners for whom Dictator Yoweri Museveni has been very adamant in questioning why they should be given bail. And I think that bail is not a favor. Bail is a constitutional right. Part of the challenge, I think, for me, is that the Constitution gives the judicial officer discretion whether to grant bail or not. So there's a lot of power invested in each judicial officer, before whom a suspect stands, before whom an application for bail is made. And I think if they are not independent, if they're not strong enough, if they're not autonomous, if the judiciary is not independent and autonomous from the executive, then the threats that come from acting contrary to Museveni's preferred outcomes of bail applications for political dissidents is not easy. It's not an easy decision to make. And so I think for me that given this sort of longer history, even before Muhoozi comes to stampede a militant practice within the judiciary, that the judiciary has been militarized in many ways, that there's this longer history of Museveni just not being impartial to bail applications for political dissidents, and just his public statements around, or when he questions why bail must be more or less a constitutional right for bailable offenses, there's a pressure that was put on judicial officers to give Museveni what he wants. Yeah. So the question around Muhoozi, for me, especially when individuals have been abducted and disappeared and held in his SFC bases, the torture chambers, the basement, the fridges. The question about bail in those particular cases is perhaps even much more sensitive, because it's not just the political will of the old dictator, but it's also going against the precedent that has been set in the Eddie Mutwe incident, in the Lukwago incident, in all these abducted people who are taken to torture chambers. Usually the application for bail is denied. They are vomited into prisons where they languish for a long time. And so I think one is the politicization of bail. As you said, I agree with you, Henry, that non-political cases, people who are in the NRM, are bailed easily on first application, often without all these demands for a week, so that the state prosecutors can examine addresses of sureties, examine credibility of sureties, examine other evidence provided. In the case of Miria Matembe, there were questions about her address, like to ask an elderly wife and mother about, her address in the presence of her husband, is also problematic. It's also problematic. But I think for me that I agree with you that pro-NRM, pro-PLU suspects, even when they are involved in more grave crimes, more grave charges are brought against them, they tend to have much easier, much more swifter processes of bail, and the outcome is positive, But for political dissidents, for members of the NUP, FDC, PFF, even NRM members such as Miria Matembe, who are in the opposition and critical of the current military takeover from the son to the father, or from the father to the son, that applications for bail have been very, very difficult. And so that is where I think that the courage of Atim is celebrated.
Should we conclude that Uganda is developing two bail cultures, one legal, one political? Would that be fair to say? And also regarding Miria Matembe, Honorable Miria Matembe, the president recently was giving remarks and he insinuated that the Honorable Miria Matembe went into the court limping and came out walking majestically, as if to suggest that Honorable Miria Matembe was pretending to be hurt. Do you think that was a fair assessment of events based on what we saw happen in that bail hearing? Do you think the president is taking it too far to allege that the Honorable Miria Matembe was pretending to be hurt by wherever she was, or do you think Miria Matembe was actually really hurt, and the idea that she walked out of court not limping should not be taken seriously?
So I watched Dictator Museveni's State of the Nation address last night, just before the football match, and I was horrified. As a Ugandan, I was horrified, Henry. Yes, by the remarks he made about Miria Matembe, but generally everything, his remarks about Dr. Kizza Besigye's prolonged trial, his remarks about I was embarrassed. I was ashamed to be a Ugandan. I was ashamed to be a Ugandan. And so maybe I should take advantage of your StreamYard space to condemn Dictator Yoweri Museveni and say, shame upon you, Museveni, for mocking Ugandans, especially Ugandans who've been involved in the liberation struggle alongside you, Ugandans who participated in building our constitution, people such as Dr. Kizza Besigye, but also Dr. Miria Matembe. Shame on you, Dictator Yoweri Museveni, for mocking them and mocking their pain and mocking the injustice they're facing. I am ashamed to be a Ugandan who has endured 40 years of your leadership, Dictator Yoweri Museveni. And so in the spirit of the shame, I think for me that when one considers the fact that Museveni has been 40 years in power, he patronizes Ugandans by calling us Vazukulu as if we are his grandchildren. And yet he is so merciless. He's mocking an elderly woman. He doesn't condemn the manner in which she was disappeared from her house. He chooses to practice sub judice, which is, speaking about cases before court. And, the principle of sub judice does not allow discussions of the merits and demerits of cases which are ongoing. And yet Dictator Yoweri Museveni, in a show of total lawlessness, decides to engage in sub judice when he discusses the bail applications and the trial of both Dr. Miria Matembe and Dr. Kizza Besigye. And so, Henry, for me, it's just shame, a lot of shame and pain coming from watching what Yoweri Museveni said and the manner in which he said it, to make a mockery of the injustice that was dealt the women's movement through the abduction of and disappearance of Dr. Miria Matembe is unacceptable. To laugh at the pain of an elderly woman who came in visibly in pain, right, is to make a mockery of the failures of the failure to protect Ugandans, the failure of the police, the functions of arresting and charging Ugandans is a function, a duty of the police. But the military usurped that role and took over. They kidnapped Miria Matembe, they took her away, and somehow Museveni finds it funny. He doesn't condemn the culprits, the lawlessness through which she was taken away from her home. This is unacceptable. Maybe I will keep quiet as you play the video, to show the state in which she was, when she came out. I will keep quiet so you can play the volume on the video.
That was the state in which the Honorable Miria Matembe came into court. We must reveal that at that moment, she had spent almost a week incognito. We didn't know where she was. We didn't know what happened to her. None of us or any of the journalists have spoken to her in person to find out where she was or what she went through. Yet, the president of Uganda seems to suggest that in that moment, the Honorable Dr. Miria Matembe was playing to theater, and that she seemed not to be hurting because when she left Parliament, she was no longer limping. Your thoughts, Dr. Sten?
No, I mean, like I said, I condemned his lack of empathy. There is that moment when she steps out of the car. There is also two other incidents that were deeply moving for me. One was when she was seated in court and cried out about the pain in her back. It was so bad she forgot to address court in English and spoke her language, and her face was contorted in pain. And the second was when the pain was so bad that they had to change the chair on which she was seated in that particular court session. So yeah, the lack of empathy. I have a back problem. I'm 52 years old. She's 73 years old. I already have a back problem. Mine is on and off, right? Sometimes I walk with a walking stick. It's so bad. The pain is so severe. Sometimes I'm better. Right now, she's got, I think, a degenerated or degenerative disc in her spine, according to the testimony she gave. And I think for me, I chose to believe her testimony rather than dwell on.
I know my back. It is not the doctor who knows it. It is me, and my people know. That's why they were holding me. I cannot be on those things even tonight. I was thinking when they thought they were bringing me home, I would go to Sirajim, they had to go to the back. I cannot, madam, you can't kill me tonight. I'm not running away. I'm a Ugandan citizen. I'm not, oh my God. Have human heart and allow that I go either for scan tonight or I go to that thing where it can at least the machine is there for one day. How can you just want to kill me like this? I can't imagine. The laws are laws, they are not human beings. The laws procedures don't have a human heart. And you see me here, and you know that all these are lies. But you want me to, at least I was saying, I can say it again, even when I was suffering, I said that at least I used to shoot you once, boom, but this breaking, honestly, shattering me to pieces like this. And you are here and you can't allow me to go. If you want evidence, let me go for scan. We shall pay for the scan. And in fact, I was going to ask anyway, the machine has also gone. You just can't see me like this. And you say, where is evidence? Evidence which cannot be seen from the very person. Does it come from paper? Evidence.
Henry, you're muted.
There is a lot to unpack from that clip. First, a reference to wish for Amin's kind of torture, that at least Amin could have just shot me once. I would have died without going through all this pain. And the reference to evidence as just paper. You see me, I'm here, I'm telling you what's happening to me, but you prefer reading it from a paper when I'm telling you. And I played this because of your reference to the back pain that you also experience in some cases. Having seen this clip again, your thoughts as we continue to interrogate these issues.
I mean, so it's good you played that particular segment, because I think for me, while we celebrate the fact that on the following day, Gloria Sheila Atim, in fact, did grant Dr. Miria Matembe bail, that first day was terrible. it was terrible because I think for me, the dehumanization of our judicial officers, somehow this military expectation that they are going to yield to the order from above, even when there's no order from above, there's an expectation for them to maintain the flow of those who yield to the order to remand to prison all political dissidents. That particular day was very painful, very difficult for many Ugandans who believe in freedom, who believe in free speech, many Ugandans who are opposed to the abduction, kidnap of any Ugandan from their homes, but also from the women's movement. Miria Matembe represents so much for us. So I think for me, the first response is when she cries out to bring Miria Matembe to her knees. She's a very strong character. As a person, she's a very strong character. She has been part of the fight for freedoms, liberties, constitutionalism for almost 5 decades. Yeah. To reduce her to a woman pleading and crying and begging, a younger woman begging for mercy, crying and saying, I know my pain, is painful to witness. But she was reduced to begging a woman whose empowerment was perhaps won through the sweat and struggle of Miria Matembe and many other women movement leaders of her ilk, of her generation. So the question about what is evidence is an important question, but I think for me, again, that part of the criticisms that were levied against Sheila Gloria Atim the day before this particular day when you show was the dehumanization that the processes of court demand of judicial officers, the blindness it takes one to ask for evidence of pain, of illness, of having a broken back or whatever, dislocated disc in the back, is the very same blindness that is demanded of judicial officers before whom a tortured, brutalized, broken, bleeding, limping political prisoner is presented. The same sort of inhumane posture that is not moved by the pain of and suffering of another Ugandan has been witnessed when we saw Dr. Kizza Besigye during his hunger strike, or we witnessed Eddie Mutwe coming in broken and shaking. I remember he was shaking because of what had been done to him. It's very similar to the inhuman response we saw when Erias Lukwago severely changed his demeanor, broken his posture, his silence. Erias Lukwago was silenced almost throughout his entire bail application. We all know about the history of his hospitalization, medicalization, trying to get treatment for his different conditions, and yet a magistrate denied him bail, remanded him to prison, and instead instructed the prison authorities to take him to Mulago Hospital. So in terms of my response to that clip you have shown, I know you're asking me to talk about the question around evidence, but I think for me that the reliance on paper as proof of pain, proof of torture, proof takes away the compassion and mercy that I think is a virtuous character any judge in Uganda dealing with political prisoners who are going to be coming from torture chambers will carry on their bodies. I think for me, from that particular clip, maybe what I can do is to appeal for more humanness, a return to having soft hearts. The Bible talks about God hardening the heart of Pharaoh. God gave him a heart of stone. And maybe our judicial officers now have hearts of stone, and these hearts are hardened even much more against political dissidents who are opposed and critical to the regime of Dictator Yoweri Museveni and his military prince. So yeah, maybe that's what I want to say. But maybe the third scenario where I thought Sheila or Museveni missed was when we witnessed Dr. Miria Matembe mentioning that she had not eaten for 3 days just after she's taken out of that particular courtroom, as she's waiting to board the truck, the pickup truck that took her to Luzira Women Prison for that night. We are shown when she is handing over her personal effects, her small bag, to her husband, and she's given a big pack of Lucozade juice, and Sarah Birete is requesting the prison wardresses if Dr. Miria Matembe can be allowed to eat some food before going to prison, because, as she said again and again, she hadn't eaten for 3 days, 3 nights. So she'd been kept in detention and she hadn't been fed. Now, I'm one of the women who know that Dr. Miria Matembe is very particular about her advice to political prisoners. When we are abducted, when we are imprisoned, many times she runs very fast, or she sends comrades as rapid response team to us to come with food and medicine and water, because she says many of us get poisoned when we eat the food from our enemies. So I suppose if she's paranoid about eating food given to her by Museveni's regime apologists or by Muhoozi's SFC brutes, she probably refused to eat food prepared by them, food whose safety she wasn't sure about. And so she was hungry for 3 days. Now, when Museveni mocks her for limping, it could have been the hunger, the 3 days hunger and 3 days thirst of a 73-year-old woman, combined with the pain, combined with we don't know how and where she was sleeping. We witnessed that Arias Lukwago, that photograph where we're shown where he's sleeping or he's passed out flat on the tiles of the basement. So if Miria Matembe was locked up in similar sleeping facilities, did she sleep on the floor? So hunger combined with a dislocated disc, combined with old age, combined with lack of sleep in comfortable space for 3 nights and 3 days at least, all of these could have resulted into her limping, but also the stress of not knowing and uncertainty of not knowing where she was, who was holding her, why they were holding her, why they were holding her for too long. We don't know what sort of interrogation she went through, what sort of torture she went through. And also, if you remember, her face was quite bloated and swollen, and one says maybe she'd been crying. So why would Miria Matembe cry to the point that her face gets swollen? And so I think for me, I condemn Dictator Yoweri Museveni's lack of mercy towards Miria Matembe. They call themselves brother and sister quite openly and quite publicly. I condemn his mockery of her pain. I condemn the fact that he tries to dismiss all of this. And so I'm grateful that Sheila Gloria Atim was able to use her prerogative and discretion as a magistrate and release Miria Matembe.
Thank you, Dr. Stella. Let us briefly interrogate the idea of a radical magistrate. Right? The term radical magistrate, it shouldn't mean that there's partition magistrates, but partition suggests deciding of the law. I think what it should mean is judicial officer who is radical enough to believe the Constitution still works. Right?
Why? Go ahead.
Yeah. I feel like in an authoritarian climate, neutrality itself can look rebellious sometimes. So in this instance, I wonder if judicial independence is now perceived as defiance, or why it is perceived as defiance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think when decided to listen to you, you
Yeah.
actually made the point. The point for me is that the context in which our judicial officers, our magistrates are operating is authoritarian. It's also very military. It's totalitarian, and there is penalization for those who don't act accordingly, right? But I don't think it is radical to use one's discretion and grant a constitutional right. Okay? And maybe I will retrace a few feet back and explain my position. Yes, in the given circumstances, it seems radical because almost all grade 1 magistrates, similar to Atim, are cowardly, and because they rely on the militant dictatorship for promotion, for rewards, for, I don't know, if salary increments, for recognition, because they rely on the dictatorship to survive even, then cowardice is the easier alternative. Cowardice that refuses to stand within the power given to them by the Magistrates Act and the Constitution, the power of discretion to give bail, grant bail for bailable offenses, is within their remit. They're not doing anything extraordinary. They're not doing anything special, right? They're not doing us a favor. It's not too radical to take one's constitutional rights to practice one's profession as a magistrate and say, I grant you bail. However, because of the circumstances, the context, the long 40-year-old dictatorship that's now sliced with an incoming military dictator in the form of, this fascist Muhozi, it becomes special and extraordinary for a magistrate to do the needful, to do the obvious, to do what must be done according to the empowerment she's given to within her professional remit as a magistrate. It's not so special. It's not radical. What makes it radical, I suppose, for me, is the times in which Sheila Atim and every other magistrate and judge is operating in Uganda. So what does it take to be a radical magistrate is an important question, but for me, it's a question that's introduced because of the context in which we live. I see nothing defiant in a magistrate exercising her constitutional right. That is what that is what should be. That when an elderly woman facing trumped-up charges, let's accept trumped-up charges. There was nothing sectarian about what Miria Matembe did. If in fact what she did is sectarian, then all of us should go to should be charged. Museveni himself should be charged because he's been calling out against corruption and the misuse of taxes. Miria Matembe, the charge with which she's charged is around her criticism and condemnation of misuse of taxes, right? How many of us have done that in the anti-corruption movement that has been on the ground in Uganda? The Anita must fall, Anita must resign, Gen Z-led protests. All of us were crying out against the misuse of taxes, the parliamentary exhibitions, the anti-corruption walks, the Black Monday movement that's a lot older. Maybe 10 years ago, we had the Black Monday movement. We were all crying out against misuse of tax, public funds, particularly in supporting, these funds were used for a small family, the Museveni family and the in-laws, many of whom belong to one ethnic group, one tribe. So what Miria Matembe has been saying, what she was criminalized for, is not new. We've all condemned this. So those are trumped up charges. What Sheila Atim did is not extraordinary. It's not defiance. What makes it seem to be radical is the context in which we live. And it is terrible that Ugandan judicial officers, magistrates, and judges have been reduced to thinking about their safety first instead of thinking about their constitutional rights given to them within the ambit of their profession. So I haven't answered your question about what is a radical magistrate, but I'm saying it's not radical enough for me for a magistrate to stand out, stick out her neck, and do what must be done. She didn't do anything extraordinary. Under constitutionalism, under rule of law. However, because we're living in a militant dictatorship, it is extraordinary what she did. And that is why I continue to celebrate her courage. It may sound as if I'm contradicting myself. Actually, I'm not. I'm saying that what Sheila Gloria did is what should be expected of every other judicial officer, every other magistrate, the courage to stand and speak and live securely, safely. But
So,
it's
yeah.
terrible times that Ugandan magistrates and judges are intimidated simply because they're doing what's constitutional. If they practice their profession constitutionally, there will be consequences, and that is terrible. It's terrible to witness in Uganda.
There seems to be an agreement that we are living in unprecedented times where lower magistrates or lower court magistrates, judicial officers could be categorized as cowards or people who are engaging in cowardice actions. Yet what we call cowardism could be reframed by themselves as managing fear for public attack, managing executive pressure, as well as managing their career consequences that could pertain to doing the right thing. How can Uganda as a country, but specifically how can the citizens of Uganda protect lower court judicial officers who stand by the law? How can we protect Sheila Atim?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I want to protect her. I don't think it's my duty to protect her. That's my reflex. My reflex response would be, why should it be my duty to protect her? But having said that, yeah, I think your question is important because of the times in which we live. That the context in which we live implores us, appeals to us, especially if one has the same automatic response as I do. That question is calling us to be cognizant of the risks they put themselves into by acting contrary to the expectation of the military junta, the military junta. So how do we protect them? I think recognizing their courage for what it is important. We saw a lot of people on Twitter, which is where I sometimes circulate. We saw a lot of praise for Sheila Atim on Twitter. We saw it from the Uganda Law Society. They had a whole space dedicated to her on Saturday where a number of people came to speak. I think there was Doctor of Law Muchibi. There was Dr. Patricia Atim, who also works on the Uganda Judicial Services something. There was Advocate Kalali, who represented Dr. Miria Matembe, and Advocate Anthony Asimwe, and there was Lillian Drabo and Isaac Semakade, the president of Uganda Law Society. They all had a space which was dedicated to celebrating, recognizing, and acknowledging the importance of Sheila Gloria Atim's decision. Now, does that protect her enough? I don't know, but we identify with her, we recognize what she's doing, we see her, we hashtag and celebrate her. And Miria Matembe, when she was released on bail, sang Tukutendereza Yesu, Yesu, Holy Mwana Gwendiga, sang about victory. The women's movement recognized the importance of the time. I don't know if this is protection, but I think recognition of the work they do given the times is important. When we name them our champions of justice, our champions of merciful judicial practice, may not protect them, but it's to own them as our own. It's to encourage them. I don't know if that would protect them from a militant dictatorship, because we saw what happened to Arias Lukwago. He's not a magistrate, but he's a lawyer who was again practicing his profession within the remits of constitutional provisions for lawyers. He was taking papers to serve on military brute Muhoozi when he was abducted and tortured, and he's now in prison, right? So we have seen the ability of the military regime to punish practitioners of law for doing their work. I think we are yet to witness, well, again, maybe before I say we are yet to witness the military penalizing judicial officers, we witnessed Black Mambas descend upon court, arrest and take away prisoners, suspects who had been released on bail before from remand. So there have been instances where the military has interfaced with judicial officers who grant bail. However, we are yet to see Muhoozi coming down hard on a magistrate or a judge who grants bail to a suspect that was abducted and tortured by Muhoozi. Maybe this is the next step in terms of the progression of military capture of the judicial, the judiciary sector. So I don't know how citizens can protect magistrates. Do you have any ideas on this? But maybe again, it's a question that Isaac Semakade or Ronald Egesa might have better responses. I don't know that we can protect them.
Yeah, unfortunately, Isaac is still wrapped up in a mentorship program that he's still working on, and Egesa is also not able to join us yet. But I think they would have very good insights on how to either protect or encourage more young or lower court judicial officers to do the right thing. Because, of course, doing the right thing is not always easy. And it can be hard for most of the people who engage in this space of doing the right thing, especially in the Uganda and the context that you just talked about. We hope that that context will change soon, transform into a better context where people can freely express themselves, where judicial officers can courageously follow the law, the Constitution, and implement it in the way that the framers of the Constitution intended it to be implemented. These are not easy times, and they require courageous people. These people should not necessarily be categorized as radical, either radical magistrates or radical judicial officers or radical practitioners, whether they're working within the police or the army or other institutions, but rather that these people are patriots. They put country before self. They put the law before politics, and they are able to implement it following the expectations of the constitutional framers. And this does not come easy. It continues to come with courage, especially within the current context. But we are confident that once the roll has been set rolling, the ball has been set rolling, it should be much more easier for other people to follow suit, to do the right thing, and to continue encouraging Ugandans to follow the law and do the right thing, not just in the courts of law, but in all institutions. We know what happened within the office of the IGG and the people that they have been able to convict, people who are very close to power, people who are working in parliament. In the past, the IGG hasn't moved in the same manner that it moved this week. The folks that I'm talking about are Obore and company. And I say Obore and company because Obore is the one who has been very visible in parliament. Director of communications, and of course, one who was very vocal during the parliamentary exhibition, trying to explain away all the wrongdoings of parliamentary officers. But before we briefly touch on the judicial officers, on the parliamentary officers that were taken to court, do you have any more thoughts regarding Justice Atim and all other lower court judicial officers as we wrap up the conversation regarding either being a radical magistrate or following the law? Your thoughts as we delve into another conversation.
Right. So just to remind ourselves that the actual suit, the trial of Dr. Miria Matembe has not started, does not happened. And granting her bail does not mean that the charges against her have been dismissed. There is still a court process that's going to unfold. And one of the things I want to say is, although her passport was taken away from her and she was forbidden to travel, although part of her bail conditions included stopping her from talking the way she was talking before, that offended her accusers, she has already called out her brother. An interview must have been given either today or yesterday. She's not backing down. In that interview, she still responded. I think she must have given that interview today, because I saw her responding to Museveni's mockery of her. Dr. Miria Matembe responded to Museveni's mockery of how she limped in but seemed well when she was leaving the court premises. And she was straight talking. She was telling him, Museveni, I don't know if you're in charge of the country anymore. Tell us, take charge of your son. And I want to say that for me, I draw courage and a lot of hope from an elderly woman who's been speaking out all her life, speaking out against the failures and excesses of dictator Yoweri Museveni, Miria Matembe, even after she was abducted, tortured, kept hungry, locked up, charged with sectarianism. I remember last week we remarked about how ironical it is that a woman who was Minister of Ethics and Integrity in the president's office for many years is charged for speaking out against lack of ethics and lack of integrity and calling out corruption. Even after everything she went through, she's still speaking. Even today, she was talking. And that is rare courage. I hope that Ugandans who haven't gone through imprisonment, you've never been remanded to Luzira Women Prison, you haven't been abducted and taken into Mhozi's basement. What stops us from speaking out? If an elderly woman who's been speaking out is still speaking out, Matembe is still breathing fire, how much more should I? How much more should you? How much more should those of us who are in relatively safe spaces such as exile, how much more should we speak out? The issues with Uganda are not going to go away with our silence. What was his name? Mohammed Chirumira Moyogwa Gwanga Afande. Just before his murder, he said, if you speak, you die. If you don't speak, you die. So you may as well speak such that by the time they kill you, you'll die after having spoken your truths. And I think for me that given, I'm glad you're sharing the 1995 September 21 news cut from, it must have been the New Vision. I don't know what newspaper that is. You know those faces, look at the very young faces. Winnie Byanyima, I can't see very clearly, but yeah, the four of them, Grace Akelo Akulo, Miria Matembe, and Speciosa Kazibwe.
Yes.
That from that time, you know, all these years she's been speaking. She's been speaking, and she's still speaking. So how much more for those of us who are not old, who haven't been tortured, who live in relative safety? How much more for us? And I think that while one might want to celebrate Gloria Sheila Atim, and rightly so, I choose to celebrate Miria Matembe, even when we don't agree many times. I am on the extreme end of feminism that she would call unprincipled, too radical, but I want to hail her for being radical and speaking out when it is dangerous. Even when danger came to her and took her away, abducted her, subjected her to torture, Miria Matembe has not kept quiet. She still speaks even today. You know, after prison, after the torture chamber, after abduction, she still talks, she's still breathing her truths. And so, oh, that's a nice picture. Yeah, I can really recognize her. I don't know who the other people are. Who are these other people, Henry?
Those are some of the historicals with whom they constructed the constitution, which they are defying right now and violating at will. So I got these pictures from Jimmy Spire's X handle, and it describes them as September 1995. And she says that Honorable Miria Matembe, among others, outstanding women celebrating the new constitution, whose drafting she had been part of, including a strong Bill of Rights in Chapter 4. Now, at 73 years, she has to helplessly plead like a child, in tears before a young magistrate, for things as basic as respecting her right to health and fair hearing, spending the night in jail with her raw disregard pain. I can't imagine what is running through her mind as she flashes back. That is the expert that Dr. Spire Sentongo offered when he shared those pictures, those two pictures that I just shared with you. on this platform as well. But as the expert says, those are some of the historicals. I think one of the people in the back there is Dr. Kiza Besigye. Who is I think that Dr. Kiza Besigye right there in a green ballet. Isn't that Dr. Kiza
Yes,
Besigye?
it looks
It
like
looks like one.
him.
Yeah, young man as well. He's now incarcerated and has been denied bail numerous times. But those are the historicals that created the constitution, which they are violating at will in 2006. And that's why Dr. Miria Matembe, his vocal, continues to criticize his colleague and senior brother, President Museveni, and challenging him to follow the conversations that they deliberated on during this time when they were creating the Uganda constitution. That is the picture, Dr. Stella.
Yeah, I mean, looking at her, you know, 30, slightly over 30 years ago. So it's 30 years later, almost 31. In September, it will be 31 years later. And she is begging for mercy. Besigye is begging for mercy. The people they're begging for mercy were probably 10 years old when the constitution was being promulgated. No, I mean, so you talked about Museveni, and yesterday, and this is perhaps not among the things you want to talk about, but yesterday he made a mockery of Dr. Kizza Besigye's extended trial in court, and part of the worry for me is how the values for which the people in the picture you're sharing, the values for which they fought and worked and, toiled. Matembe says they went all over Uganda getting the will of the people, understanding the demands of the people, all the things they worked for were stood on their heads in yesterday's State of the Nation address that Dictator Museveni gave. And the level of propaganda that one must produce, believe in, spin in order to get to that point where it makes sense to ridicule bail, to make a mockery of the abduction and torture and pain of a colleague such as Miria Matembe. I don't know what happened to Museveni. I don't know what military power did to Museveni in order to reduce him to the point of forgetting all the values and ideals that sent him and others, including the constitution makers, to fight for liberating Uganda from 81 until 86. And I think for me that's part of the takeaway from everything that's happening in the country, as the country's democracy continues to degenerate, as human rights violations escalate, as the rule of law continues to be sabotaged and get replaced with lawlessness and authoritarian militarism. I think part of my disappointment is that the promise of democracy that was given to us in 1986, the promise of constitutionalism that was brought in 1995, all those promises sound very hollow right now, very hollow right now. And I suppose my hesitance to celebrate Sheila Gloria Atim's execution of professional duties as a magistrate is based on a fear that if I see defiance in mere professional conduct, mere constitutionalism of a magistrate, mere upholding of the law, mere exercising of power given to her, discretionary power given to her to practice her profession, then we lose everything that was promised to us in the name of democracy in 1986, that was assured to us in the name of constitutionalism in 1995. And so for me, it's just a renewed call to standing up for the values we believe in as Ugandans. I'm quite incoherent, but I think my fear arises
okay.
from the moment. My fear arises from what we seem to be losing in the current moment.
Right. Well, as we wrap up, there's a video that I would like to share. And this video talks about the history of Uganda and where we've been, who we have seen, and what the current government is doing. Of course, there's a comparison of how previous governments have governed, what scholars have said about the state of Uganda or the Uganda question, kingdoms. And I think let us listen to this expert and interrogate it before we wrap up this conversation.
Was said to be born in the borders of Uganda and Rwanda. And who was said to be born in the borders of Uganda and Rwanda and to be a Munyarwanda. And the whole process of exclusion of the Banyarwanda people across the both sides brought conflict through the NRM, as you just said. And I think that this concept of violence, that Mr. Museveni has agreed that violence is the only solution to Uganda's problems, and has got a lot to do with the history of Uganda. Uganda was based on kingdoms, where the imperial power, Great Britain, made sure that the whole concept of divide and rule reached an apogee of violence that it is said that Uganda has never really recovered, and that is why Milton Obote was just as violent as Idi Amin. People believe that he was much more of a civilian leader. He was not. In fact, Idi Amin is probably the only leader in Uganda who actually believed in something called a black republic. As Mr. Mamdani argues in Neither Settler Nor Native, or the subsequent book, I believe, is a question of Uganda, has a lot to do with trying to bring disparate kingdoms into a unified Uganda republic. And that has been very, very difficult for Uganda. And that is why Mr. Museveni is using this violence to keep Uganda under his boot. And his son, who is also a military soldier, is following on the path of the president, because if Mr. Museveni dies, Mr. Museveni is an old man, he's nearly 80, over 80. The same concept of the family rule of violence and stomping on the political rights of Ugandans is what this group believes in, and I think that is the discourse that we need to move to understand how Mr. Museveni operates.
And Prof, coming to you, Professor Mamdani, are you
Yeah, so this is what folks are talking about Uganda, the state of governance in Uganda, the historical aspects of it, and how it meets the future or the current dispensation. Of course, as we continue to engage in these conversations, we pull out some of what other people are saying historically, but also how they interact with the current and how they could potentially impact the future. A current violent Uganda and how they have chosen to resolve issues is very important, especially now that we are talking about how the courts of law should operate, how justices should conduct themselves. beyond the political influence, but beyond the military influence? How do we create a society that respects the rule of law and create trust among citizens? Your thoughts, Dr. Stella?
I mean, the value of history cannot be undermined. I think for me that part of the history I would have wanted to engage with pertaining to the topic of today is a history of the interactions between the military and judiciary in Uganda. We know, for example, so I'm an academic. I know, for example, that Vice Chancellor from Makerere University was disappeared by Dictator Idi Amin, right? And I want to hear. I was expecting if Isaac Samakade was here or when he comes later on, I would want to know what the consequences of militarization have been among judicial officers, among magistrates in Uganda. How many magistrates were disappeared? How many were murdered? How many were imprisoned? How many? What is the history of militarism? People say, and I think Miria Matembe is one of the many who say that Uganda is regressing, going back to Idi Amin times, when Haji Salongo Erias Lukwago was abducted. I remember his wife, another, lawyer in Uganda, highlighting that we've gone back to those historical times when we had earlier dictatorships. And in last night's State of the Nation address, one of the things that seemed to irritate Dictator Yoweri Museveni is the saying "bizemu," these things that were the atrocities from history, from historical dictatorships are coming back. And I think in terms of the history that the Mamdanis write and the one that new governance scholars appreciate is important history. But in terms of discussing the way forward for judicial officers and magistrates and the fate of political dissidents who are going to have to engage with the courts increasingly as the judicial processes are weaponized, I think a history I really want to be reminded about, perhaps from the president of the Uganda Law Society, is this history of the judiciary and the military. What was it like in Idi Amin's times, in Obote II times, and Tito Okello, Basilio Okello? What happened to the judiciary? What was it like to be a magistrate? What were the worst incidents of reprisal from the military state that we witnessed in Uganda's courts, among Uganda's magistrates and judges, when the dungeons of Nakasero were filled with political prisoners? What was the situation of the judges? If we know that history, we know what's in store for us as we regress more and more back to those dark days. So in terms of historical lessons, I would want to have, if I was going to prepare well, I would, for a future based on these cyclical notions of what goes around comes around. If the military junta of dictator Muhoozi is going to be as worse or as bad as that of Idi Amin, if we are going back on all our gains in the judiciary to times that were darker than that are darker than where we've been, I would want to interrogate that history and know what happened to judicial officers, magistrates, and judges during Idi Amin's days, because that's where we're heading for. That's where we're going. There are lessons to learn from there. And so maybe when Isaac comes, you can ask him that question from me.
many lessons to learn. I'm not sure if Isaac is done with the previous program that she was engaged with, but I think what we have learned today engaging in this conversation is that we are at a crossroads where Museveni's government and Amini's government have no distinguished difference. They seem similar. In some instances, General Yoweri Museveni's government seems even worse than Amini's government. And these are all up for debate, scholarly debate, but also up for discussion, for simple discussion by regular citizens. And I think what Magistrate Sheila Gloria Atim's ruling in Matembe's case, what I think should be remembered is that it was not a favor to a political figure. It wasn't it's not perceived as a rebellion against government, but it is a reminder that justice still has a language, that liberty, presumption of innocence, due process, and judicial courage are still important in Uganda's political dispensation. And that Uganda does not need partition magistrates, but rather principled ones. So I think as we wrap up today's conversation, it's important to understand that today's climate may not be, Justice or Judicial Officer Sheila Gloria Atim, what she did in offering Matembe bail was not radical at all, but it was just the right thing to do. Obviously, it looks like my colleague Isaac may not be able to show up today, but we shall put these questions to him whenever he's available to answer them, because he worked closely with the late Justice Kanyehamba. Kanyehamba in many legal circles is referred to as an encyclopedia of Ugandan law and how it really operated. So he probably might have picked up some insights from him, the historical aspects of how justices behaved. I think the late Sam Njuba also wrote a few experts in his book, The Betrayal, on how, having been a president of the Uganda Law Society himself, he shared some of his insights on how not just lawyers, but also judges should behave in a country that has proper democracy. So these are folks that we can refer to learn more about the legal fraternity of Uganda. Obviously, I'll bring in the current president of the Uganda Law Society to give us more insights on these issues. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to be with us today, but he's always offering lessons on X. So if you can follow him, we are always getting insights from him from these different spaces. As we wrap up this conversation, Dr. Stella, your thoughts all together on how citizens should perceive how the legal system operates in Uganda today. I know I wanted us to talk about the Obore team, but of course that conversation is still ongoing. The case is already in the court of law. I want to commend the IGG for pulling this one off, even when they have failed to pull off similar instances in other jurisdictions or convicting other folks. In some cases, even being encouraged to not pursue folks in Uganda, because if you pursue them in Uganda, they'll take the money out of the country. We haven't been able to talk about it. Perhaps in an upcoming space we can talk about it. But your thoughts, Dr. Stella, as we wrap up this conversation today.
So you asked me two questions. One was a conclusion to the previous conversation. And I think for me that I just want to remind Ugandans that bail is a constitutional right. It is still in our constitution. It is not a special favor. And even when Museveni and others of his ilk may not want political dissidents, opposition members, critical voices to be granted bail, it remains a constitutional right, and nobody is above the Constitution. All of us are ruled really by the Constitution, which is the principal law of the land. And in that regard, I think that we should not be embarrassed or ashamed or fearful of asking for bail. I know, having been a political prisoner myself, I know what it's like to be a suspect, and people fear that sureties faced with when they're requested to be one's surety is immense. And so I just want to encourage Ugandans not to give up that civic duty of going to court and standing as a surety for a suspect, especially if they are political dissidents, because sometimes family may not be available to support these individuals. And I think to our lawyers under the leadership of Uganda Law Society, just to thank you for doing the great job. All the times we've seen political prisoners presented before court, if there's time, there has been enough mobilization, whether through their political parties or through civil society organizations or through Uganda Law Society. There's been legal representation that's been provided. It is becoming increasingly more dangerous to represent political dissidents, and we've seen this from the previous punishments that have been, they've been subjected to, including threats from Muhoozi to Lord Mayor Erias Lukwago, outgoing, and Kale Baraka and Aaron Kiza and all the other lawyers. And so I think despite hard times falling not just to the judiciary, but also the lawyers, the legal representatives, the advocates of court, I think I want to commend our different lawyers for continuing to standing with, representing, advocating for the different rights of suspects, particularly political opposition members. And maybe the last one for me is to the DPP's office and the state attorneys who have to represent, Uganda versus Miria Matembe, that history is recording what they do. And yes, they must practice their profession as state prosecutors, working on behalf of the state to examine and prosecute suspects. I want to caution and remind them that when they're working with political dissidents, many times we come before you as suspects facing trumped up charges. Do not allow yourself and your profession to be used to penalize innocent Ugandans who are merely speaking out for justice, for constitutionalism, against corruption, against growing authoritarianism. Because while you may you may think that you are protected, very soon it will catch up with you, and by yielding to the orders from above, you risk compromising your profession as a lawyer working for the state. So even as you're working on behalf of the state to prosecute political opposition members, remember to work within the remit of the Constitution. And I suppose to our judicial officers, I just want to salute those who continue to work where justice is the frame of reference and not politicization or militarization or seeking political favors. You have mentioned the partisan magistrates and partisan judges. Those ones I condemn, and I I rebuke them to get onto the correct side of justice, because history, again, we shall remember you. History keeps a record of those who worked for the people and those who worked against the people. In terms of the Obore question, I think we need to just create a space around corruption. I remember, I think it was Egesa in a previous space, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, who said he would know about the seriousness of Muhoozi and PLU to come against corruption if they went further with the Anita Among corruption charges, if they were able to round up the others who facilitated, enabled, or benefited from her corruption. And we see it starting. We see it starting. I don't think there's enough time for us to go into this, but maybe I will end on this note that on social media, pictures of the houses of Chris Obore are being shown alongside videos of Chris Obore dancing. We are in things, we are in things. And if that wealth was acquired through just means, he's entitled to his wealth. However, if that wealth was acquired through corrupt means, by stealing from the public fund that would have taken care of hospitals where women die in labor, that would have taken care of cancer institutes where cancer patients lack adequate medication, that could have taken care of education where children still study under trees and have libraries that have no books and teachers who have who struggle to make ends meet. If Chris Obore and his clique of Anita Among sycophants relied on the public purse to enrich themselves and their families, justice is coming after them, and the process has only started. So maybe next week, maybe another week, we can go into the Chris Obore question. But I think for me, I look forward to a time when seriousness will be taken in the approach against corruption, because Uganda is not a poor country. I think part of the poverty comes from the callousness with which our resources, our revenue, our treasury is plundered.
And I hope things are going to be taken seriously, because from the likes of people who are working closely in these institutions, the IGG, for instance, the Human Rights Commission, you heard what Honorable Angadia had to reveal, and how folks are appointed or elected to serve in these positions. And you heard her frustration. She's a woman who has been leading the commission for some time now. I think her contract ends next year in September or October. Hopefully she's gonna get to next year, October. It feels like a long way to go. It feels like she came out too soon, but I hope she doesn't get penalized for coming out too soon and advising her boss on who should be appointed to these kinds of commissions, because the quality of people that we have in the IGG's office, the quality of people that we have in the Human Rights Commission, the quality of people that we have in all institutions matters a lot on how those institutions function and how they serve the taxpayers of Uganda. It's been a pleasure hosting you, Dr. Stella. As always, we shall convene again. Hopefully, there's not going to be so many breaking news throughout the week, but if they are, we shall probably convene within the week as well and talk about the issues that arise and hopefully try to engage more people as we continue to have these very important conversations. Thanks again for joining us. For all those people who are joining us online, someone is saying that is Wangadia inviting the firing. Hopefully she's not going to get fired. She's still constitutionally her contract ends next year. She still has more than a year to complete it. But yeah, we need more people like Wangadia to come out and engage in these conversations. Folks who are joining us online, thank you so much for joining us. Godfrey, Tuchikube, and other folks who are always joining us on these conversations. Those who I cannot name readily. Always a pleasure to have you. Please comment as much as possible. Let us know what you want us to talk about next and how we can engage more people in these conversations. Thank you so much, Dr. Stella. Have a great Sunday evening. God bless you.
Thank you for hosting. Thanks, Henry. Bye-bye.
This is the state of the nation. Uganda. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Salah.